too many people are using China versus the United States as a political football and not really sitting down and figuring out how do we make this work on behalf of both cultures and both countries. And once we do that, then I think we can get past the attitude of, well, that's somebody from China, they can't do business, or that's somebody from the United States, we can't do business. That's not a win-win situation for either culture.
Everybody, I want to welcome you back to the YouTube channel. And tonight I have a very special episode for you today, because many of you who follow this channel, you know that my goal here is to foster a better relationship between my home country, the United States, and China. These are the two biggest superpowers in the world. I'm under the belief that when the United States and China work together, the entire world is going to win. And I'm very excited to welcome in two guests today. This is Minh Phan and Governor Bob Holden from Missouri, and they are part of an organization called the United States Heartland China Association. So Governor Holden, Minh Phan, thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Thank you.
Delighted to be with you.
I'm going to read a little bio here just so everybody gets to know a little bit more about both of you. Minh Phan, you are the executive director of the US Heartland China Association. You're born in China, studied at Peking University before immigrating to the United States, and continue your studies at the University of North Carolina, also going on to earn your MBA. And you transitioned to a very successful corporate career as the leader of ideation and innovation at practice at Hewlett-Packard, their global corporate services. You then went on to be the executive director, COO of the US China Innovation Alliance, helping over 100 U.S. companies visit China on sponsored trips, and also a part of the US China Now, which is an organization building a bridge of understanding the cultural divide between the U.S. and China. So you have a tremendous amount of experience, obviously, linking China and the United States. And Governor Holden, you have an amazing background as well. Of course, you served as Missouri's 53rd governor from 2001 to 2005, and you helped establish Missouri's first trade office in China, and some amazing accomplishments you did as you helped move Missouri from 41st to 5th in terms of women in leadership positions, and appointed over 200 African Americans to prominent leadership roles during your time. You then transitioned to become a professor at Webster University, where you helped bring the first Confucius Institute to Webster University there in St. Louis, Missouri. And you've also been very active in many cultural exchanges, bringing student delegations from China to Missouri, and then also Missouri back to China. So both of you have a very similar background, and I think all three of us a very similar background. So I'm excited for tonight's conversation because, obviously the U.S. and China, our relationship right now is very difficult. We have some conflict at the moment, and inspired when I find an organization like this. So first question to Minh Phan, can you tell us a little bit more about, the Heartland Association and why it's so important, for example, the farmers in America, and working with China, and kind of more about your mission together?
Late Senator Stevenson of Illinois actually started the organization as Midwest US China Association around early 2000s, and then recruited Governor Bob Holden, who was visiting China at the time, opening Missouri first office, said, "Hey, Bob, if you're not running again, join me on this Midwest US China Association." So for over a decade, Governor Holden and different community leaders throughout the heartland really at a local level promote exchanges, delegation in, delegation over. And only about 2018, they rebranded the U.S. Heartland China Association, because it's not just the Midwest and also the South, the Delta. And that Governor Holden felt that this community has a lot to be gained from more exchanges with China, and he really wanted to help them. So with that, I was brought on because I had the good fortune of meeting Governor Holden when he was leading the Heartland Mayor delegation in November 2019. And I was in China, actually trying to organize US China Now, my own nonprofit at the time, some activity promote people-to-people exchanges. So I was fortunate enough to help Governor Holden to arrange some meeting with students in Guangzhou, and met some of the Heartland mayors, and realized some of the mayors never been to China, and realized how special Heartland China Association mission is. And then became a part of the organization at that time. So just really a quick history there.
Oh, fantastic. That's a great intro. And let's turn it over to Governor Holden, and tell us a little bit more about the organization. And you're obviously, you've spent a tremendous amount of your time. I know you've served in the public space for many, many years. You have a great passion for China, and obviously connecting the Heartland Association of America. So tell us a little bit more.
Well, first of all, Minh has done a super job with our organization, and we couldn't find a better partner. and someone that truly is very engaged in how do we build relationships going forward. How do we build a bridge of opportunity where it's a win-win situation for all involved? Where's our opportunity to reestablish the importance of the Heartland region, because it is a breadbasket of the world in agriculture. And I came to the conclusion nobody's really talking about China at the time, and China was a real possibility. So I made the trip to China, announced that Missouri was going to have an office in China, and started that process of building those relationships. And it's been a win-win situation for both. As I said, we are really a very strong leader in just about all components of agriculture, whether it be rice, whether it be poultry, whether it be beef. We wanted to change that and made the trip, announced that we were going to open a relationship. And that was the beginning of the United States Heartland China Association, which I serve and Min is the executive director of.
Are the farmers open to that? Are they open to more cultural exchanges and certainly more economic exchanges?
I would think on the beginning, the farmers are hesitant because it's about dealing with a culture that by and large, many of them were not used to interacting with.
Right.
But as soon as that relationship has been established and they build that relationship, then it's been very successful because it's a win-win situation. It's a win for the farmers in our Heartland region, and it's a win for the people of China who need the products.
We learned about farmers who actually really appreciate their Chinese customer, and even though they don't speak any language, they want to make their Chinese customer before pandemic when they come visit to feel at home. So they had mahjong table set up. So they figured that their Chinese customer will feel a little more at home. And we met with farmers about they love to do tours. They had visited China before, but we also realized in many parts of Heartland, for a lot of farmers, their customer is the next elevator where they sell their grain, and they didn't realize where they end up, right? Which is in China. So there's a lot of more education needed. But again, from the trade association, they're fully aware of the importance of the market. But it's only at the local farmer level. Sometimes China is too far and removed.
At the beginning of any relationship, there's always that hesitancy, not having any familiarity with the other culture.
Right.
But as soon as you establish that and they get to know the relationship, then it can be very successful. I know of a case in one of our communities where they were talking about establishing a Chinese business, and the community was opposed to it. They didn't need any outsiders. They could do it themselves. But as soon as the office was open, they started taking applications to work there. The attitude in that community changed overnight. What we're trying to do is help build those bridges of opportunity so it can be a win-win situation for both our agricultural community, our manufacturing community, and the people of China.
We do think there is a growing sense of almost paranoia going on. I mentioned that during the pandemic, when we received over $1 million of PPE donated by Chinese American philanthropists from East Coast, West Coast, we had a volunteer taking them into rural areas. And one volunteer took a box of PPE to a rural fire department, which had no mask at the time. But the fire department chief saw the Chinese character on the box, immediately said, "No, I don't want them. I'm sure they're contaminated."
Right.
But the volunteers like, "Wait, but you have no mask." Said, "No, we don't want them." And she came back. She's like, I have never realized my community has this kind of bias. So there's a lot of growing sense of, everything with China is a red flag, which is actually for Chinese Americans like me, it just caused a lot of trouble.
Many people don't understand. We haven't developed a relationship to understand the cultures. I'll never forget, I had a student in one of my classes. I was teaching at Webster, and at the end of the semester, after turning in their grades, I'd always allow the students to speak. And this one young lady got up and she said, "Governor," and she was from China. She said, "I will not go back to China the same person that came to America." And that's what we've got to get past in our own culture and with China, is get to understand each other, know where we come from, what generated that interest. We all want to have good families. We want to be safe. We want to be secure. We want to be successful. Let's find those relationships and build on them.
Yeah, that's really well said. And Governor Holden, I'm going to take a quote from your bio on the website where it says, "I believe that long-term economic success for the United States and China must be built on mutual respect, clear understandings, and honest dialogue. And this can be achieved by expanding our cultural ties, creating more educational partnerships, and creating bridges of opportunities for successful business in both countries." Obviously that quote really, you've confirmed that with both what you and Min have said just now, and I think there's so much of education, and I think when we get down to the very lowest levels, when we're just having these one-on-one connections, that's where we have these real cultural exchanges. And for myself as well, I lived in China for 10 years. I've traveled to over 60 cities in China. Many times into some very rural communities, and it was amazing because I was, probably the only American that many people had saw, and connecting with these real people. And when you get down to that level and you're just connecting with people one-on-one, we realize we're a lot more similar than we are different, right? Like you had said, all of us, we all want to, the best for our families. We all want to have, a stable job, food on the table, good shelter. These are very similar things that every country in the world, we all seek. I have spent the last 5 years in Canada, and it was very interesting learning about Canada. And the first Trudeau was, Justin Trudeau is the current prime minister. His father, Pierre Trudeau, was the one that actually opened up relations with China, for Canada. Actually, Canada established that 1 year before the United States did. And it was very interesting because he had gone to China, spent time, with the government in China and said, we see that China is going to become a force. We see that you are growing, that you basically you need foreign investment. Canada can also benefit from this. So how do we focus on economics, and how do we focus on trade that's going to help your average Canadian and your average Chinese? And I think that's very similar to the United States. Obviously, when we go down to the farmers in America, for example, in Arkansas, I just found out last week that Arkansas is one of the top rice producing states in the United States. I had no idea until I did some research in preparation for this interview. And actually, we have a lot of farmers that, produce good quality rice in the state of Arkansas, actually export that all over the world, including China. So like you said, that's going to be a benefit for these farmers. And, anytime that we can get these countries working together, I think it's a fantastic opportunity.
If we can create win-win opportunities, then there's the foundation for success for both. And that's what we've got to reach for, try for, and work toward, is how do we make that a win-win situation? Doing that, then it'll be the self-interest of both cultures to figure out ways to be successful and to build that partnership going further. There's good people in China. I think there's good people in the heartland. There's some people I probably am not close to in the heartland. There's probably people in China I'm not close to for particular reasons. But by and large, the culture of China and the culture of this heartland region are very similar if they just get to know each other.
Both nations really need good farming, right? I mean, farming is at the cornerstone of a successful nation. Obviously, China has a tremendous amount of farmers, and we have a great respect for our farmers in America. I mean, we always learn that Heartland Association is the lifeline of a healthy United States, and obviously we export around the world as well, and very similar to China. And obviously, China, with the world's most being the world's most populous country, they cannot produce enough products, domestically. They do rely on relationships with countries around the world. So I think that's really good. I have a question for you regarding, there was a recent story that was published in the New York Times, really highlighting a North Dakota corn mill. And there was a farmer there that I think they were interested in doing business with China. And then there was the government there had passed some legislation effectively. We're seeing this right now in the US government. For example, I know Tom Cotton, Marco Rubio have passed some bills or put forward some ideas saying that, we need to be banning, any type of Chinese entity coming into the United States, purchasing any type of farmland. I'd like to just hear your thoughts on that, on this development. If you could maybe highlight a little bit of this story and, share your thoughts on that.
Well, I think it's the same type of attitudes that we've seen throughout not just our heartland region, but throughout the country. Too many people are using China versus the United States as a political football and not really sitting down and figuring out how do we make this work on behalf of both cultures and both countries. And once we do that, then I think we can get past the attitude of, well, that's somebody from China, they can't do business, or that's somebody from the United States, we can't do business. that's not a win-win situation for either culture. Best thing we can do if we want to have a really good, strong foreign policy is build those relationships so we can understand what their positive aspects are, what their differences are, how we need to try to encourage them to change in some areas, how they can maybe give us input and how we can change in some areas to be more productive. That's what's really missing in the political rhetoric today. It's just the 10-second soundbite that really doesn't talk a whole lot about how do we make people's lives better than they are today.
I think we also have the benefit because we work with about 20 states from the Great Lake down to the Gulf of Mexico. You mentioned a story in North Dakota. We actually noticed very interestingly through our research why China matters through Heartland. State by state, there's a great pattern. The states who are more globally connected, thriving, whether it's Illinois or Indiana or Ohio, they are very involved in the global capital market, and there's a lot of FDI invested in from different countries, including China. And while other states where they are less internationally connected, they're more susceptible to certain simple narrative. So the example you mentioned about North Dakota, we actually knew it months ahead because our local partner reached out to us, say, oh, we just walked off this city council meeting. I couldn't believe what happened because the city, the state, and everyone thought it was a great investment opportunity, wet milling corn plants coming to near the farm. But then some of the local community members came out with billboards about, human rights, and then we don't want the, Chinese Communist Party in the neighborhood. And then they were like, they taken them by surprise. What we're realizing is national security topic is becoming very at the local level, stopping normal business from functioning. But again, we do see the difference from different states. As I mentioned, when we hosted the Chinese ambassador helped organize the event in World Food Prize in Iowa, many other states reach out to us saying, oh, the sky didn't fall. I guess we could invite him to come visit too.
And I know a lot of it really is just like you said, there needs to be an education, and I understand that because and that's what I primarily focus my time on is having spent 10 years of my life in China, learning a lot about the culture, the language, the people. I find many Americans are just very curious because we don't know a lot. I mean, the average American, they don't know anything about China. So obviously China's presented one way in our media. It's usually very negative. There's obviously a lot of fear, and even some people would. I remember, for example, I was working with I'm a member of the Professional Golfers Association of America. And when I was in China, I came back to a meeting and basically the president of the association said, Cyrus, I'm just so grateful that you would sacrifice your life in America and go live in this really poor country like China. I mean, your living conditions must be horrible. I mean, and you're doing that just to grow the game of golf. And I'm like, well, I live in Shanghai. It's actually a really nice city. I have a really nice apartment. Actually, my quality of life is very good there. And I'm at one of the top, actually the number 74th ranked course in the world, according to Golf Digest. It's actually a beautiful community, and so they valued me being an American, being in that golf community. But it was just this perception. He thought I was basically living in a third world country and just almost living in shambles because that was his perception of of China. And I said, hey, let me just kind of show you some of the videos of where I live and what I do. So I just saw there was a disconnect there. And again, it was just really education. Once I said, hey, actually, we host some big tournaments there. We have a lot of international players come there. There's a great community there. And I think they were very surprised to hear that. But I know a lot of it just really is education. One of the things I want to highlight, one of those things, that you mentioned was, for example, from Tom Cotton and Marco Rubio, they have said that, for example, if a Chinese entity comes in and buys a farmland, they might be getting state secrets, or they might be having access to a U.S. military base. Is this really just some fear mongering? I mean, is that just, trying to do trade? Would you agree with that?
I think they need to be very careful to clearly separate the Chinese government from the Chinese people and the private Chinese investors.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. I really like that. And like you said, when there's great people in China, there's great people in America, and essentially your job is just to connect them, and to foster that relationship, that goal of your association, very similar to my thinking is, when the US and China work together, the world is going to win. And let's kind of come to the conclusion of today's chat. I want to talk a little bit about an amazing event that you put together in April. You mentioned it briefly earlier, but it was when you had the ambassador, the Chinese ambassador to America. This is Ambassador Qinggan. believe him and his wife came to Des Moines, Iowa. You also had the U.S. ambassador to China, Nicholas Burns, who is currently in Beijing. He joined the session via Zoom, and I think it was a great event. Obviously, getting the ambassadors together. Tell us a little bit more about that event, because I think that is something that is so powerful when you have the ambassador to China, flying from Washington D.C., coming to Des Moines. Obviously, we know Iowa has had a very close relationship with China for many years. President Xi Jinping obviously spent some time in Iowa. Back in his time when he was much lower level position in the government. But I know that the small rural communities in Iowa, have a good connection to China. So just tell us a little bit more about that event and what that accomplished.
I think Governor Holden will agree with me that maybe a follow-up interview you should have is with Ambassador Quinn.
Okay.
So Ambassador Quinn is a longtime legend in Iowa. He was the former president of World Food Prize, and he actually had the fortune to meet with Xi Jinping's dad, Xi Zhongxun, in the 1980s when the first Chinese provincial leader delegation came. And then later he met with President Xi Jinping in 2012 when the high-level dialogue was hosted at the World Food Prize. To some extent, as you know, the Chinese culture, they love symbolism. So 2022 is 10 years after that 2012. And also Iowa is where the Xi Zhongxun legacy had the roots. When Ambassador Qin Gang arrived in DC, one of the first private individual he met by Zoom was Ambassador Quinn, who was an advisor to us. And Ambassador Quinn said, "Oh, you should come visit." And Governor Holden also said, "Oh, you should get out of DC, come visit the Heartland." And so when finally he was going to visit Iowa, we were excited because they're normally in DC. And Governor Holden was, actually Governor Holden and Ambassador Quinn very wisely suggested that we continue to promote exchanges between U.S. and China on agriculture. We both sides need each other. We can't, unlike other areas, this area is relatively we have a lot of aligned interests. That's one of the reasons we were able to get Ambassador Burns to join, because it's advancing U.S. interest in agriculture. For Ambassador Qin Gang, it's visiting, the legacy of the leaders, and so we felt like it was amazing. A small nonprofit in the Heartland was able to create this platform. One thing that was really interesting, we learned that it was the first public event of Ambassador Qin Gang since he arrived in the U.S.
That's a fantastic accomplishment. I mean, to have the ambassador come to the event, and also again having our American ambassador again. That's the two. What better guys to foster this relationship than the two ambassadors representing their countries? Fantastic event.
And another, Tom Vilsack, the Secretary of Agriculture, is also from Iowa. Was a former governor of Iowa. So there's a lot of relationships over the years have been built between these two cultures. And that just shows you building those relationships in the culture means dollars and profit and sustainability in the business world.
It's been a very fascinating chat with both of you today, because I've learned a lot about a little bit more about your organization. And, I think the key takeaway that I have is just as an American, for our best interest, we obviously depend on relationships with every country in the world. And, it's not about what can we do inside our own borders. It's about what can we do inside, but also building that. We live in a global economy, right? It's building those relationships with other countries as well. And that is why America has been so successful. And I think having these cultural exchanges, obviously bringing students, from China to Missouri, what a great opportunity there for them to learn about, United States culture. And exactly like your student said, I will go back to China, a different person. I mean, it's impossible to spend a significant amount of time in another country and not have it change you. I know for me, I learned a lot of lessons in China that I've taken back to America, and a lot of great opportunities and experiences. It has shaped me into the man that I am today, and has helped me become a more well-rounded person, because I have a little bit more insights into this amazing world that we live in. So I'm very, very much inspired by today's conversation and just the work that both of you continue to do with the organization.
From my standpoint, anytime you dim opportunities for growth going forward, you're really foreclosing opportunities in the future that you will never see, but somebody else will.
Right.
And that's not in our self-interest. And so what we've got to do and should do for our own benefit is build those relationships. And if we see something that we disagree with, then say so and explain why and move forward. The key here, though, is to build a relationship that by building it, you help protect and solidify the culture's commitment to working with each other for mutual success.
I would end say, as one of our board members said, he's going to China for the first time because 1 out of 5 people in the world is a Chinese person. And his city was 10% Chinese Americans. So I would say that there's tremendous to be learned. And also the learning is mutual. I do think that our Chinese friends could learn more about the heartland and the part that's between the coasts. One of the mayors went on the delegation was telling the Chinese students and their parents that if you're only going to the East Coast, West Coast, you really don't know the whole heart of America. So
right.
I do think, thank you for what you're doing to continue the mutual understanding and dialogue.
Absolutely. Well, it's certainly my pleasure, and I want to thank both of you for spending time with me today. It's been so great to learn more about your organization, and I look forward to, now that I'm back in the U.S., hopefully one day we can meet up, potentially maybe back in Iowa or somewhere in the heartland. I'd love to, maybe even come and interview some farmers, really learn more about how this relationship is going, and again, just try to get that message out of promoting this mutual understanding, more education, and the fact of when U.S. and China are working together, the world's going to be a better place.
We welcome you to our effort. Anything that you see that would be helpful, we'd appreciate it. If you see things that we're not doing it the best way possible, then don't be bashful, say something. Because our whole focus is how do we build a better relationship, both for our heartland region and the People's Republic of China.
I know, serious. We might want to edit this out, but we had a farmer in Iowa who offered to do a virtual tour of his farm because he wanted to show the Chinese customer how they're growing his corn, how they're feeding their livestock. And so maybe I'll talk to you about, a tour of the farm.
Fantastic. No, that sounds great. Well, Governor Holden and Min, I want to thank you both for your amazing time tonight. Thank you so much for your insights. And everybody, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. This is really exciting because, again, this is a big reason why I moved back to the United States as well, is to make these connections and tell these stories that need to be told and, really help promote this message of peace and understanding. So everyone, thank you for watching today's episode, and we'll look forward to seeing you in a new one soon.
Everyone, I have some exciting news. With the success of this channel, I'm expanding my team to bring more value to all of my Patreon members. We have some big plans to provide you with more information and news about the US and China relations. This will include more exclusive interviews, extended version of my YouTube videos, live Q&A sessions, and much more. With your loyal support, we can really be able to provide you guys with some amazing information and news. So if you aren't a Patreon member, you'll miss out. Simply click the link below and sign up today. And I want to thank each and every one of you who watches my videos. All of this would not be possible without your amazing support.